Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here. Before we begin moving through the exhibition, I'd like to take a moment to arrive together, both physically and mentally, and to consider how this space asks us to slow down. The title of this exhibition, If You're Lost, reads like the beginning of a thought rather than a statement. It doesn't offer directions or solutions. Instead, it acknowledges a condition, being unsure, disorientated, or in between. In this context, being lost isn't something to fix. It's a way of opening ourselves to new forms of attention. This exhibition doesn't ask us to move efficiently or to understand everything right away. It invites wandering, pausing, looking again. Meaning here unfolds gradually, through repetition and return rather than through a single clear narrative. Dara Lorenzo's practice begins with walking, not as transportation, but as a form of listening. Walking allows the body to register space slowly. The city becomes something felt rather than simply seen. The ground beneath us, sidewalks, streets, and worn infrastructure carries traces of countless movements over time. These surfaces hold memory, pressure, and history, even when we no longer consciously notice them. In this work, the city is treated almost like an interior space. It's not a backdrop, but a lived environment shaped by use, erosion, and repetition. The marks and texture that appear throughout the exhibition are not invented. They are gathered. They come from direct contact with the world. As we move through the exhibition, I encourage you to think about how you occupy space in your own daily life. How often we move on autopilot, following familiar routes without really paying attention to the surfaces we cross. This work asks us to break that habit, to notice what usually remains peripheral. You may encounter moments that feel fragmentary or unresolved. That's intentional. Memory rarely arrives as a complete picture. It comes in layers, impressions, and partial returns. The works here reflect that process. They resist closure and invite you to stay with uncertainty. I also want to invite you to pay attention to your own body as you move through the gallery. Notice where you slow down, where your eye lingers, and where you feel drawn or unsettled. This exhibition isn't meant to be consumed quickly. It rewards patience and presence. Rather than guiding you towards a conclusion, If You're Lost offers a shared condition, the permission to not know exactly where you are and to remain open to what emerges through attention. With that in mind, let's begin. As we move further into the exhibition, I want to spend some time with the idea of walking, because it sits at the core of how this work comes into being. For Lorenzo, walking is not simply a way of getting from one place to another. It's a way of entering into relationship with space. Walking slows the body down just enough for attention to shift. The pace allows the ground to register, not just visually, but physically and emotionally. Cities are often experienced at speed. We move through them quickly, guided by habit and efficiency. Sidewalks, streets, and infrastructure fade into the background. But when you walk without a fixed destination, those overlooked surfaces begin to assert themselves. Cracks, patterns, worn edges, and textures emerge. These details are easy to miss, yet they carry enormous weight. In this exhibition, walking functions as a method of listening. The city becomes something to be read through contact rather than observation from a distance. The artist's attention is drawn downward to what supports us, what we cross daily, and what quietly absorbs the traces of countless bodies over time. Many of the surfaces that inform these works, sidewalks, manhole covers, asphalt, fragments of rubble, are shaped by repetition. They record pressure, weather, labor, and movement. They are physical archives, holding evidence of time passing even as we move across them without noticing. What's important here is that memory is not treated as something abstract or purely eternal. It is grounded, it lives in material. The city becomes a kind of memory field, one that is collective, layered, and continually rewritten. As you look at the works around you, notice how scale shifts. Some impressions feel monumental, while others feel intimate, almost fragile. This fluctuation mirrors how memory works as we move through space, how certain moments expand while others recede, how some details stay sharp while others blur. There's also a sense of return embedded in walking. Many of the routes Dara revisits are familiar, yet the same surface might be encountered again and again, yet never feels identical. Light changes, weather alters texture, time leaves new marks. Walking becomes a practice of repetition with difference, a way of noticing change within the familiar. This act of returning is central to how memory operates. We don't remember something once and leave it behind. We revisit it, each time from a slightly different position. These works reflect that process. They don't aim to fix a moment in place. Instead, they allow memory to remain active, shifting, and unfinished. As we stand here together, I invite you to think about your own walking routines, paths you know so well you barely register them anymore. What might be embedded in those surfaces? What histories, emotions, or routines are quietly held there? In this exhibition, walking becomes a bridge between inner and outer worlds. The city is not separate from itself. It shapes how we move, how we remember, and how we understand our place in time. The works you see here are traces of that ongoing exchange. Before we move on, take a moment to let your eyes rest on one work. Notice its textures and rhythms. Imagine the surface it came from. Consider how many lives have simply passed over it, and how walking as a simple act becomes a way of remembering. As we continue, I want to shift our focus from walking to what happens after, how those encounters with the city are carried back into the studio and transformed through printmaking. In this exhibition, printmaking functions less as a means of reproduction and more as a method of collection. Rather than beginning with an image or a fixed composition, the work starts with contact. The city itself becomes the source material. Many of the surfaces that inform these works, sidewalks, manhole covers, asphalt, fragments of concrete, are approached as sites of information. They carry marks of use, pressure, erosion, and time. When Dara takes an impression from these surfaces, she's not extracting an image so much as gathering data, a record of texture, rhythm, and scale. What's transferred is not just form, but experience. These impressions hold evidence of movement, of bodies passing, of weather wearing down material, of infrastructure bearing weight. In that sense, each print operates like a field note, documenting a specific encounter with a place at a particular moment. Printmaking is especially suited to this kind of work because it is inherently physical. It requires pressure, alignment, repetition, and release. The act of printing mirrors the forces that shape the city itself: compression, friction, and of course, contact over time. You'll notice that many works here are built through layering. One impression sits atop another. Ink builds unevenly. Some marks register clearly, while others fade or partially disappear. These variations are not corrected or cleaned up. They're left visible, emphasizing process over perfection. This layered approach allows time to remain present in the work. Each layer marks a different moment, a different surface, or a different decision. Rather than collapsing these moments into a single unified image, the work holds them together, side by side. In this way, printmaking becomes a way of thinking about memory and accumulation. Just as cities are built through layers of use, and repair, these prints grow through repetition and return. Meaning emerges gradually through density rather than clarity. There's also an important relationship here between control and unpredictability. While printmaking involves careful preparation, the outcome is never entirely predictable, especially when working with found surfaces. Pressure shifts, ink behaves differently, the surface resists or accepts the transfer in unexpected ways. These moments of resistance are crucial. They remind us that the city is not a passive subject. It pushes back. The work becomes a negotiation between artists, material, and environment. As you look at these pieces, I encourage you to read them slowly. Notice where texture feels heavy or worn. Notice gaps, overlaps, and interruptions. These are not mistakes, they're evidence. They tell us something about the surface that was encountered and the conditions under which the print was made. In this exhibition, printmaking operates as both archive and translation. It gathers information from the world and represents it in a way that invites reflection rather than explanation. The works don't decode the city for us. They ask us to consider how much is already written into the ground we walk on every day. Before we move on, let's take a moment to look closely at one print. Let your eye follow its textures. Imagine the surface it came from. Consider what kinds of stories might be embedded there, not as narratives, but as traces. Now, as we move through this part of the exhibition, photography begins to surface more clearly, but not in the way we might expect. Here, photographs are not used to explain or document. They don't function as evidence or narrative anchors. Instead, they appear as fragments, interruptions, or traces. These images are partial. They're often layered, cropped, obscured, or paired with other materials. Some feel faded or distant, while others feel abruptly present. This instability is intentional. Photography here is not about preserving a moment intact, it's about acknowledging what can't be fully held. In everyday life, we often turn to photographs to remember, to fix a moment in time, to hold on to something that's already slipping away. But these works resist that promise. Rather than offering clarity, they introduce vulnerability. They ask us to sit with absence as much as presence. There are moments in this exhibition where an image may feel suddenly personal, even if you can't quite explain why. Something catches an expression, a gesture, a fragment of a body or a place. That emotional pull doesn't come from recognition or context, it comes from resonance. This is where photography becomes a site of emotional puncture. The image reaches us before we can interpret it. It bypasses explanation and goes straight into feeling. In these moments, we're reminded that images don't just show us what has been, they confront us with what has been lost. Photography carries time within it. Every image quietly insists, this has already happened. In this exhibition, that sense of temporal distance is heightened. The images don't feel sealed in the past, they feel suspended, hovering between then and now. Layering plays a crucial role here. Photographs are often embedded within printed textures, interrupted by other marks, or partially concealed. This visual interference mirrors how memory operates. We don't access the past cleanly. It's filtered through emotion, repetition, and change. What's also important is what we don't see. Faces are cut off. Spaces are incomplete. Context is withheld. These gaps invite projection. They allow viewers to bring their own memories, associations, or losses into the work. The image becomes a meeting point rather than a statement. In this way, photography in the exhibition functions less as representation and more as an emotional trigger. It activates something internal rather than providing information. The works ask not what happened here, but what does this bring up for you? As you stand with these images, notice your own response. Where does your eye linger? Where do you feel a sudden tightening, a sense of recognition, or perhaps a moment of discomfort? These reactions are not incidental. They're central to how the work operates. Photography here is not about control or preservation. It's about acknowledging fragility. It allows memory to remain incomplete, unresolved, and alive. Before we move on, take a quiet moment with one image. Don't try to name it or explain it. Let it sit with you. Notice what it stirs and what remains just out of reach. Now, as we spend more time with these works, it becomes clear that they are not only records of place, they are records of the body at work. The body is present here not as an image, but as an active force shaping every decision, every layer, and every mark. Printmaking, again, is a physical process. It involves lifting, pressing, aligning, pulling, and repeating. These actions require weight, effort, and attention. Over time, they accumulate in the body. The work is shaped not only by intention, but by fatigue, resistance, and rhythm. In this exhibition, process is not hidden. You can see where pressure shifts, where ink behaves unevenly, and where layers don't fully align. These moments are left visible. They're not corrected or smoothed over. Instead, they function as evidence of time spent, of repetition, and of return. This is where emotion enters the work, not through illustration, but through labor. Feelings are not depicted. They are embedded. The slow, repetitive nature of printmaking mirrors emotional processes that can't be rushed. Grief, memory, and self-reflection unfold over time. They require revisiting the same material again and again, each time from a slightly different position. The body becomes a site of memory here. Just as the city holds traces of movement and use, the body holds experience, sometimes consciously, sometimes without our awareness. The physical act of making becomes a way of accessing what might otherwise remain unspoken. There's a quiet discipline in this work. The artist returns to the studio repeatedly, engaging with the same materials and surfaces, knowing that no outcome will be exactly the same. This repetition is not about mastery or control. It's about staying with something, allowing it to change slowly. You may notice moments where the work feels restrained, almost withheld. There's an emotional economy here. Nothing is overstated. This restraint invites closeness. It asks you to lean in, to look carefully, and to stay present with subtle shifts in tone and texture. The process also allows space for unpredictability. Materials here respond in their own ways. Rather than eliminating these variables, the work incorporates them. Emotional experience functions similarly. It resists neat resolution. As viewers, our bodies are also implicated. We move closer to see detail. We step back to understand scale. We adjust our pace. This physical engagement echoes the artist's own movements and reinforces the ideal that meaning here is not purely intellectual, it's felt. In this exhibition, making becomes a form of care. Care for material, care for memory, care for what is difficult to hold. The process creates a space where emotion can exist without needing to be resolved or explained. Before we move on, I invite you to pause yet again with one work and notice how your body responds. Do you feel drawn closer? Do you want to step back? Where do you feel tension or ease? These responses are part of the work's meaning. Before we conclude the tour, I want to spend some time with an element that might initially feel secondary, but is actually central to how these works operate: the frames. Unlike traditional frames, which often function as boundaries or protective barriers, the frames in this exhibition remain open and exposed. They don't enclose the work so much as hold it in place. Their structure is visible, their edges are ragged and porous. These frames are made from reused wood, and that choice matters. The wood carries its own history, marks of wear, grain patterns, traces of its previous use. It's material that has already lived a life. Rather than hiding that past, the frames make it present. This emphasis on reuse mirrors the logic of the work itself. Just as the prints gather traces from the city, the frames gather traces from prior contexts. Nothing here is pristine. Everything has been handled, worn, and altered over time. The openness of the frames allows the work to breathe. They don't seal the images off from the world. Instead, they suggest continuity between the gallery space and the environments from which the work originates. Inside and outside begin to blur. Time is a crucial presence here. The frames do not suggest permanence or finality. They feel provisional, as if the work could shift or change. This aligns with how memory functions, not as something fixed, but as something continually revisited and reworked. Repair is another key idea embedded in these structures. Reuse implies care. It suggests an attention to what already exists rather than a desire for replacement. Repair here is not about restoring something to its original state, but allowing it to continue visibly altered. In cities, repair often leaves marks, patches, seams, and uneven surfaces. These traces are not erased. They accumulate. The frames echo this urban logic. Their imperfections become part of the work's language. There's also an ethical dimension to this choice. By using reclaimed materials, the work resists excess and prioritizes sustainability, but it also does so quietly, without declaration. The gesture is integrated into the overall material sensibility of the exhibition. As viewers, the open frames subtly shift how we engage with the work. We become more aware of the edges, supports, and structures of what holds things together. This awareness reinforces the exhibition's broader interest in what underlies experience, surfaces, systems, and supports that are usually overlooked. In this way, the frames operate as more than presentation devices. They are conceptual extensions of the work. They hold time, memory, and care within them. As we prepare to finish up, take a moment to look closely at one frame. Notice its texture, its joints, its wear. Consider what it has held before and what it holds now. Lastly, in closing, to return to the title, If You're Lost, ultimately offers permission. Permission to slow down, to revisit, to pay attention to what's beneath your feet. As you continue to experience the exhibition, I invite you to think about your own daily paths. What surfaces you cross without noticing, what histories they might hold, and how memory lives not just in images, but in movement, texture, and time. Thank you for being here. I'm happy to answer questions or talk more about specific works.
Hi, my name is Dara Lorenzo, and I'm a printmaker and mixed media artist from Baltimore, Maryland.
It's interesting to me because when I moved to Oakland, I just like,
I got into print when I took a printmaking class in college during a time where I had hit a wall with my painting, and it recharged my art making. I was determined to figure out its multi-dimensionality. I learned so much along the way. I still keep learning from printmaking all the time. Okay, sort of like it, sort of. Obviously some of the rubbings are like more clear than just rubble or
masonry or whatever, but they have like, you can see letters or you can see what it says.
I'm a person who easily gets distracted and bored. Printmaking keeps my attention and wit focused on what I am making, which is something I love about working with it. My print process is counter-traditional at this point. I combine print process with drawing, collage, and painting techniques through the press. I also continue to work on the prints raw after using the press for the first layers in my work.
I think a little bit to crop, maybe, I don't know. But they're front and back, so I want to do more collage on the other side. There are all those patterns from when we went, well, this one is from Howard Street. So the second one is going to be from when we went to Old Town Mall. So, like in different directions, some of these buildings that are there on Howard Street with, you know, that had the fire. You know, so repetition, crazy color, additive, subtractive textures.
So printmaking became my savior process. It has helped me slow down and really think about my work and my mark making. This is truly needed for me because I'm not a calm person inside.
It's screen print and it's all a mess, but you know, we try to keep it as clean as possible. It's got screen printing everywhere. We expose screens. And I love this yellow light now because I can see everything, which I usually cannot see in a yellow lit room, so this is good. New exposure unit. I figured out the times for it. Nice. So, you know.
Memory for me is an imprint. It's the stuff you can't forget. Sometimes the memories that plague you. Sometimes it's the ones you thought you almost truly forgot. Memory is a human collision of time with one another. It's a reflection of our lives. At one point, I believe it's all we have left of our version of the world. Memory creates a wonderment for me. I think about other people a lot. I wonder how they remember me, who I was or wasn't to them.